Deputy Director Bongino, you're nothing more than a loudmouth podcaster. A conspiracy-obsessed, click-chasing talk radio host who spent years poisoning the airwaves with divisive garbage just to build your audience. And now, somehow, you're the second most powerful law enforcement official in the entire country? It's not just embarrassing. It's a complete and utter disgrace to every real agent who ever risked their life actually wearing that badge. In that scorching, contempt-dripping broadside delivered with the absolute certainty of a young progressive icon who had never once been seriously challenged in public, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez believed, truly believed, she had just landed the kill shot that would end Dan Bongino's credibility, dominate every news cycle for weeks, and forever cement her as the fearless moral force holding dangerous political appointments accountable during what had been billed as nothing more than a routine FBI oversight hearing before the House Judiciary Committee on a biting cold November morning in late 2025. As someone who has spent years dissecting the brutal, high-stakes theater of American political combat, especially the explosive moments when charismatic newcomers, armed only with viral outrage and moral superiority, collide head-on with battle-hardened veterans carrying decades of documented experience and irrefutable records. I am absolutely convinced that what unfolded in that hearing room exposed a brutal truth about contemporary Washington. When rising stars who have mastered the art of performative fury and social media dominance finally encounter an opponent willing to calmly lay out verified public documents without shouting, without theatrics, without deflection, their carefully constructed armor of righteous invincibility can shatter in seconds, leaving raw contradictions exposed for millions to see. And here, Dan Bongino's methodical, unflinching presentation of evidence wasn't revenge. It was the kind of raw, unfiltered accountability that the American public increasingly demands in an era drowning in spin, slogans, and selective outrage. Every single high-definition camera in the packed Rayburn hearing room locked onto AOC's face the instant those words left her lips, capturing the triumphant little upward curl at the corner of her mouth, the same smirk she had flashed countless times before when she sensed she had landed a viral moment. She knew the clip was already being mentally edited by her team. 30 seconds of righteous fury, finger-jabbing, righteous indignation, ending with the mic drop line about the disgrace to the badge. She could already see the headlines forming in real time. AOC destroys MAGA appointee, Bongino reduced to silence. Finally, someone said it. She sat there in the perfect outfit, sharp blazer, bright lipstick, hair styled just right for the close-up, flanked by staffers whose fingers were already hovering over keyboards, ready to push the clip to every platform the second the exchange ended. The room felt like it was holding its breath for her victory lap. The gallery was overflowing. Reporters had elbowed each other for the best seats. C-SPAN's red lights glowed steadily. CNN and MSNBC had multiple crews set up. Everyone knew why the room was so full. AOC had been tweeting for days about what she planned to do to the unqualified podcaster, who had somehow become deputy director of the FBI. Her staff had already drafted the victory tweets. The script was locked. All she had to do was perform. Dan Bongino entered at 9:15 sharp. Alone. No entourage. No communications team. No lawyers whispering in his ear. Just a man in a slightly rumpled navy suit, silver-streaked hair neatly combed, face carrying the weathered calm of someone who had spent decades walking into rooms far more dangerous than this one. He took his seat at the witness table, poured himself a glass of water from the pitcher, opened a thick, worn leather folder, and waited. He didn't fidget. He didn't glance nervously at the cameras. He simply waited. AOC noticed. She didn't like it. She had expected at least a flicker of anxiety, some visible sign that the man she had spent years mocking on social media was finally feeling the pressure. Instead, he looked ready. At 10:47, she got her 5 minutes. She positioned herself perfectly, camera angle optimized, lighting flattering, staff ready to clip the highlights for Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, YouTube. She didn't ask a question. She attacked. "Deputy Director Bongino," she began, letting the title drip with sarcasm. "You're a podcaster, a talk show host, a man who spent the last decade spreading conspiracy theories on the internet for profit." She leaned forward, finger pointing straight at him. "You have never worked a single day at the FBI. You have no experience running a major law enforcement organization. You were appointed to this position not because of qualifications, but because of loyalty to a political movement." Her voice rose, perfectly modulated for maximum impact. "You are a danger to the independence of federal law enforcement. You are a threat to the rule of law. You are everything that is wrong with the politicization of our justice system." She paused, letting the cameras drink in her righteous indignation. "So my question is simple, Deputy Director. What exactly qualifies you to hold this position? Because from where I'm sitting, all I see is a MAGA podcaster who got lucky." The gallery stirred. Democrats nodded vigorously. A smattering of applause broke out from the public section before the chairman gavelled it quiet. AOC sat back, satisfied. Her staff was already typing furiously. This was the clip. This would go viral. Another scalp for the collection. She glanced at Bongino, expecting to see anger, defensiveness, the flustered stammer she had provoked in so many Republicans before. Instead, she saw something that made her stomach twist. He was smiling. Not a big smile. Not a mocking smile. Just a small, patient, almost gentle smile. The smile of a man who had just been handed exactly what he wanted. Bongino waited. 5 seconds. 10. The silence stretched until it became uncomfortable, until the entire room could feel the weight of it. Then he spoke. "Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez," he said quietly, "I appreciate your passion. I really do." His voice was calm, conversational, almost kind. "You know I'm from Queens, too. 75th Precinct, East New York. Some of the toughest streets in America." He took a slow sip of water. "I spent 4 years there as an NYPD officer. I've been shot at. I've kicked down doors in buildings where you wouldn't walk your dog. I've held dying officers in my arms while we waited for ambulances that took too long to arrive." He set the glass down gently. "Then I spent 12 years in the Secret Service. I protected President Bush. I protected President Obama, a man I disagreed with on almost everything, but a man I would have taken a bullet for without hesitation. I coordinated his security in Prague, Jakarta, Afghanistan. I was one of the youngest agents ever given operational responsibility in the Presidential Protective Division." He paused, eyes meeting hers directly. "So when a former bartender with a Twitter following questions my qualifications, the words hung in the air like smoke. I have to wonder if you even know what qualifications look like." AOC's confident smirk froze on her face. Her mouth opened, closed. The response she had prepared evaporated. "What is he doing?" she thought desperately. He's supposed to be defensive. He's supposed to be angry. This isn't. Bongino reached for his folder, opened it slowly, pulled out a thick stack of documents. "But enough about me, Congresswoman. Let's talk about you." He held up the first page, facing the cameras. Specifically, let's talk about where your campaign money went. He set the document on the table so every lens could see it. $885,000 funneled through shell companies, and nobody, not the FEC, not your donors, not the American people, knows exactly where it ended up. He looked up at her. Care to explain? The color drained from AOC's face so quickly, the C-SPAN cameras captured it in real time. Those allegations were thoroughly investigated. Bongino finished for her, voice still conversational, almost kind. Show me the exoneration. Show me the investigation report. Show me the letter that says you did nothing wrong. He waited. I'll wait, Congresswoman. We have time. Silence. Dead silence. Then he nodded slowly and began reading from the documents. Brand New Congress, LLC, a limited liability company established by your Chief of Staff, Saikat Chakrabarti. This company is not registered in Delaware, not registered in New York, not registered in any state. He looked up. That's unusual, Congresswoman. Companies are supposed to be registered somewhere. It's called following the law. He turned to another page. Between 2017 and 2019, this unregistered company received the following payments. He read slowly, letting each number land like a hammer. From Brand New Congress PAC, $261,000. From Justice Democrats PAC, a PAC that you and Mr. Chakrabarti controlled, $65,000. From your own campaign committee, approximately $20,000. He sat back. That's $885,000, almost $1 million, paid to a company that doesn't legally exist for strategic consulting. He made air quotes with his fingers. Now I spent 12 years investigating financial crimes for the Secret Service. I received a Department of Justice award for my work on the Financial Fraud Task Force. And I have to tell you, when money flows from political organizations into shell companies that aren't registered anywhere, we have a word for that. He paused. We call it a red flag. Gasps rippled through the gallery. The press section erupted in furious typing. You became famous for a video, Congresswoman. 40 million views. You sat in a hearing just like this one and talked about dark money. You said, and I'm quoting directly, we have to follow the money. Dark money is the enemy of democracy. He reached into his folder and pulled out a printed screenshot of her own tweet. Follow the money. Your words. He held it up. So I did. I followed your money. He set the screenshot down. It led to a company that doesn't exist in any state registry, run by your chief of staff, receiving almost $1 million for consulting with no paper trail showing where that money actually went. He looked directly at her. You know what we called this in the Secret Service, Congresswoman, when money disappears into shell companies with no accountability? His voice dropped. We called it money laundering. Audible gasps. The chairman's gavel banged twice for order. I'm not accusing you of a crime. I don't have the authority to do that. I'm just using your own standard. Your words. Follow the money. He shrugged. I followed it, and it vanished into thin air. AOC reached for her water glass. Her hand was visibly trembling. Water sloshed against the sides as she lifted it. A small splash darkened the tablecloth. Those payments were for legitimate campaign services. Were they? Bongino's voice remained gentle. What services? Where are the invoices? Where are the work products? Where is any documentation showing what almost $1 million actually bought? Silence. Bongino gathered the financial documents and set them aside. But the shell companies are just the beginning, Congresswoman. Let's talk about something more personal. He pulled out another set of papers. "Let's talk about your boyfriend." AOC's face went white. $6,000, 2 payments, August 2017 and September 2017, $3,000 each. He held up FEC records. From brand new Congress PAC to Riley Roberts, your romantic partner, the man who is now your fiancé. He set the documents down. "In law enforcement, Congresswoman, we have a term for when campaign money flows to a candidate's romantic partner. It's called a conflict of interest. Sometimes it's called self-dealing. Sometimes, depending on the circumstances, it's called fraud." "That was for legitimate work," she managed. "What work? What did he produce? Where are the deliverables?" Silence. "I didn't think so." Bongino didn't pause to let her recover. He reached for another stack. "Real estate records this time." "Let's move on from how you spend money, Congresswoman. Let's talk about how you live." He read from one of her own campaign speeches. "Safe, affordable, adequate housing for all. That was your promise. You said, and I'm quoting, 'We need to kick luxury real estate lobbyists to the curb and defend working people's way of life.'" He looked up. "Every official is too scared to do it except me." Your words, very inspiring. He pulled out a photograph of a luxury apartment building. "This is where you live, Congresswoman. Navy Yard, Washington, D.C., one of the most expensive neighborhoods in the city." He began listing features from the building's website. "Rooftop infinity pool with panoramic views of the Capitol. 25-meter indoor lap pool. Private massage rooms with hydrotherapy beds. PGA-grade golf simulator. Peloton cycling studio. Full demonstration kitchen with wood-fired pizza oven. Fireside lounge with a Steinway & Sons player piano." He set the paper down. "Rent starts at $1,140 per month for a studio. Goes up to $5,200 for a 3-bedroom. He paused to let the numbers sink in. "But here's the interesting part, Congresswoman. I looked into this building's participation in D.C.'s Affordable Dwelling Units program. That's the program that requires new developments to include affordable housing for low-income residents." He held up another document. "Your building doesn't participate. Specifically, explicitly, deliberately refuses to include affordable housing units." He looked directly at her. "You have a rooftop infinity pool, Congresswoman, with views of the Capitol. You have a golf simulator, a Steinway piano in your lobby, private massage rooms." His voice hardened. "Meanwhile, in the Bronx, your district, families are sharing one bathroom between 8 people. Children are doing homework in hallways because there's no space in their apartments. Seniors are choosing between medicine and food." He set down all the documents. "Tax the rich. That was your dress at the Met Gala, right? You wore it while sipping champagne with billionaires at a $35,000 per plate event, wearing borrowed designer clothes that, according to the House Ethics Committee, you didn't fully pay for." He shook his head slowly. "You preach affordable housing, then live in a building that specifically excludes poor people. You attack luxury developers, then move into a luxury development. You wear 'tax the rich' to a party for the rich." He leaned forward slightly. "In Queens, Congresswoman, we had a word for people like that, but I'm too polite to say it on C-SPAN." Movement erupted behind AOC. Representative Jamal Bowman, her squad ally, her friend, a man who had stood beside her at countless press conferences, quietly gathered his papers. He pushed back his chair. He stood. He walked toward the exit, without looking at her. "Jamal." AOC's voice cracked. He didn't turn around, didn't slow down, didn't acknowledge that he had heard his name. The door opened. The door closed. The sound echoed in the stunned room like a gunshot. He just left, AOC thought, her mind reeling. Jamal just walked out, on camera, in front of everyone. She looked around desperately. The Democratic side of the dais was noticeably quieter than before. Colleagues who had been nodding approvingly during her attack were now studying their phones, their papers. Anything but her face. Bongino watched Bowman's exit with an expression of mild interest. Then he turned back to AOC. "It looks like even your friends are starting to understand what's happening here, Congresswoman." He opened another section of his folder. "But we're just getting started. Let's talk about Amazon." His voice dropped. 25,000 jobs, and what you did to them. Bongino spread out a new set of documents, press releases, economic reports, newspaper clippings. November 2018, Amazon announces plans to build a second headquarters. They call it HQ2. They're going to split it between two cities, Arlington, Virginia, and Long Island City, Queens. He looked up. "Queens, Congresswoman, your backyard." He read from the Amazon announcement. 25,000 jobs. Not minimum wage, not part-time. Full-time positions with benefits. Average salary $150,000 per year. Total investment $2.5 billion. He set down the press release. In exchange for tax incentives that would be paid out over 10 years, only if Amazon actually delivered the jobs. New York would have gained 25,000 high-paying positions in your city, near your district, for your constituents. He pulled out another document. But you opposed it. You organized protests. You called it corporate greed. You said Amazon was exploiting workers. He held up a printed tweet. And when Amazon announced they were pulling out, when they took those 25,000 jobs and walked away, you celebrated. He read aloud. "Anything is possible. Today was the day a group of dedicated, everyday New Yorkers defeated Amazon, its corporate greed, its worker exploitation, and the power of the richest man in the world." He sat down the printout. "You celebrated, Congresswoman. You actually threw a party when 25,000 jobs left New York." He pulled out economic reports. "Do you know what happened 11 months later? COVID-19 hit. New York City was devastated. The economy collapsed. 500,000 people lost their jobs. Families couldn't pay rent, couldn't buy food, couldn't survive." His voice hardened. "Those Amazon jobs? They went to Virginia, where families are thriving now, where the economy is booming, where 25,000 people have good careers with good benefits. New Yorkers got nothing because of you." He held up a newspaper clipping. "Governor Cuomo, a Democrat, said you put narrow political interests above your community." "Those aren't my words. Those are his." Another clipping. The New York Daily News, not exactly a conservative publication, wrote an editorial saying New Yorkers would have been better off if you had never been elected. They said those 25,000 jobs would look pretty good right now. He set down the clippings. 25,000 families, Congresswoman. 25,000 families could have had good jobs, could have paid their mortgages, could have sent their kids to college, could have built futures. Instead, they had your tweets. He leaned back slightly. "Tweets don't pay rent, Congresswoman. Tweets don't feed children. Tweets don't keep the lights on. But you got your viral moment. You got your victory lap. And 25,000 families got nothing." More movement from the Democratic side. Representatives Rashida Tlaib and Ayanna Pressley, two more squad members, two more supposed allies, quietly rose from their seats. They gathered their belongings, They slipped out through a side door, not meeting anyone's eyes. Half the Democratic section of the committee was now empty. AOC watched them go, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "Amazon didn't need those tax breaks," she began, voice cracking. "Really? Then why did they leave when you opposed them?" And here's an interesting fact, Congresswoman. Amazon later opened offices in New York anyway, without any incentives. You know how many jobs? 1,500? He let that number sink in. 1,500 versus 25,000. Because of you, New York got 6% of the jobs it could have had. He shook his head slowly. But destroying jobs was just bad judgment. Terrible judgment. But judgment. What you did next was worse. His voice dropped. You compared American law enforcement officers, men and women who risk their lives every day, to Nazis. He pulled out a new set of documents. And you used the Holocaust, 6 million dead, as a political prop. Bongino paused before beginning this section. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, more personal. "Before I show you what you said, Congresswoman, let me tell you something about my family." The room fell absolutely silent. My wife's grandmother was a Holocaust survivor. Her name was Ava. She had a number tattooed on her arm, A7703. I saw that number every time she reached out to hold my wife's hand. He took a breath. Eva watched her mother walk into a gas chamber at Auschwitz. She never saw her father again. She survived the camp by pure luck. She was young enough, strong enough to work, so they didn't kill her immediately. When the Americans liberated the camp, Eva weighed 70 pounds. She was 17 years old and looked like a skeleton. His voice remained steady, but there was steel beneath the calm. She lived with nightmares for 60 years. She would wake up screaming in the middle of the night, thinking she was back in the barracks. She couldn't stand the smell of certain foods because they reminded her of the camps. She died holding my wife's hand, still afraid, still traumatized. 70 years later, and she was still afraid of men in uniforms. He looked directly at AOC. That was what the concentration camps did to people. That was the reality of those places. Starvation, torture, medical experiments on children, gas chambers, crematoriums burning bodies 24 hours a day. He pulled out printed screenshots. "And this is what you said, Congresswoman." He read aloud. "The United States is running concentration camps on our southern border. And that is exactly what they are. They are concentration camps." He set down the first printout. Then on Instagram, you used these words, "Never again." He looked up. "Never again." The sacred words that Holocaust survivors and their descendants used to remember 6 million murdered Jews. You used those words to describe border facilities. He set down the papers. Concentration camps, Congresswoman, where 6 million Jews were starved, tortured, experimented on, gassed, and burned. You compared that to border facilities with air conditioning, 3 meals a day, medical care, legal representation, television, recreation areas. His voice hardened. You compared that to places where nobody is being marched into gas chambers, where nobody is being worked to death, where nobody is being used for medical experiments. He held up his phone, showing her own Instagram post. "Never again." You said never again about border detention. You invoked the Holocaust, the systematic murder of 6 million people, for Twitter likes. AOC was crying openly now, tears streaming down her face. But Bongino wasn't finished. Even Bill de Blasio, the most liberal mayor in New York history, a man who agrees with you on almost everything, said you were wrong. He read from a news clip. You cannot compare what the Nazis did in the concentration camps. That's Bill de Blasio, Congresswoman. When you've lost Bill de Blasio on a liberal issue, maybe, just maybe, you should reconsider. He listed more critics. Representative Liz Cheney, please do us all a favor and spend just a few minutes learning some actual history. 6 million Jews were exterminated in the Holocaust. You demean their memory. Senator Rick Scott, these are incredibly dangerous and disgusting words that demean the millions murdered in the Holocaust. The United States Holocaust Memorial Museum issued a statement asking people to stop making Holocaust comparisons. He set down all the documents. 6 million people, Congresswoman. Real people, real families, children pulled from their mother's arms, grandparents worked to death, entire communities, entire cultures, erased from existence. And you used their deaths for political points. And you used their suffering to attack your opponents. You used never again, the most sacred words in modern Jewish memory, as a hashtag. AOC tried to speak through her sobs. I never meant to compare. Then what did you mean, Congresswoman? Please explain it right now to the survivors watching, to their children, to their grandchildren. She couldn't answer. Her shoulders shook with sobs. Mascara ran down her cheeks in dark rivers. Bongino waited. Let the silence stretch. Let the cameras capture every moment of her breakdown. Then he gathered another set of documents. But insulting Holocaust victims wasn't your only display of ignorance, Congresswoman. Let's talk about economics. He held up a paper. Specifically, let's talk about the economics degree you claim to have. You graduated from Boston University with a degree in economics and international relations. That's genuinely impressive. Not many people complete a double major. He set down a copy of her diploma. So when you talk about economic issues, people trust you. They assume you know what you're talking about. They believe you understand how the economy works. He pulled out a transcript from a PBS interview. July 2018, you appeared on Firing Line with Margaret Hoover. She asked you about the low unemployment rate. And you said this, he read slowly, emphasizing each phrase. Unemployment is low because everyone has 2 jobs. Unemployment is low because people are working 60, 70, 80 hours a week and can barely feed their family. He set down the transcript. PolitiFact, not a conservative organization, Congresswoman, a mainstream fact-checking service, rated that statement. He held up the ruling. Pants on fire. Their worst rating. Not mostly false, not needs context, not misleading. Pants on fire. He began explaining why. 1. The number of people working multiple jobs has absolutely nothing to do with how the unemployment rate is calculated. That's Economics 101. First semester, maybe first week. 2. Only about 5% of Americans hold multiple jobs. Not everyone. 5%. 1 in 20. 3. People working 70 to 80 hours a week, which would require 2 full-time jobs, represent about 300,000 people out of 150 million workers. That's 0.2%, a rounding error. He pulled out a quote from an economist. Harvard, Congresswoman, issued a statement. Whether someone has multiple jobs doesn't enter into the construction of the unemployment rate. He set down the paper. Harvard, not Fox News, not Breitbart, Harvard. They're basically saying that anyone with a freshman economics education would know your statement was wrong. He looked at her with something approaching pity. You have an economics degree from Boston University. So I have to ask, did you skip that class? Or did you just assume nobody would check? AOC was sobbing now, unable to form coherent words. Her carefully applied makeup was completely ruined. Her staff in the gallery stared at their phones, refusing to look up. Bongino continued, voice calm but relentless. Because the difference between us, Congresswoman, is simple. When I say something, I make sure it's true first. I verify. I check sources. I confirm facts. When you say something, you just hope it sounds good enough that nobody Googles it. He gathered the economic documents. But getting economics wrong is just embarrassing. What your own chief of staff admitted about the Green New Deal. He pulled out one final set of papers. That's something else entirely. Bongino held up an interview transcript from the Washington Post. Saikat Chakrabarti, your chief of staff, the architect of the Green New Deal, the man who set up those shell companies we talked about earlier. He began reading. In an interview with the Washington Post, Mr. Chakrabarti said, and I'm quoting directly, "The interesting thing about the Green New Deal is, it wasn't originally a climate thing at all." He paused to let that sink in. It wasn't originally a climate thing at all. Your own chief of staff, on the record, to a major newspaper. He continued reading. "Do you guys think of it as a climate thing?" the reporter asked. And Chakrabarti answered, "Because we really think of it as a how do you change the entire economy thing." He set down the transcript. "So, while you were on television telling Americans that we had 12 years to live, while you were scaring children into having panic attacks about climate change, while you were telling families that the world was ending," his voice hardened, "your own staff was laughing behind closed doors about how the whole thing was just a Trojan horse." He pulled out the original Green New Deal FAQ document. "And let's talk about what was actually in this plan, before you deleted it from your website." He read from the document. "Economic security for all who are unable or unwilling to work." Not unable. Unwilling. You wanted to pay people who simply didn't feel like working. "Get rid of farting cows and airplanes." That's a direct quote from your document, Congresswoman. Farting cows, cost estimates from independent economists, between $51 and $93 trillion over 10 years. That's trillion with a T. He set down the FAQ. When the Senate voted on the Green New Deal, do you know what happened? He held up the vote tally. 0 voters in favor. 0. Not a single senator, Democrat or Republican, voted yes. The final count was 0 to 57. 7. Your own party was so embarrassed by this proposal that they voted present instead of yes, just to avoid going on record supporting it. He shook his head slowly. And when it failed, when it got 0 votes, when even your own party refused to support it, he pulled out another interview transcript. You blamed your staff. You said, and I quote, "That was, an early draft. I think somebody had a bad day at work." He looked at her with something approaching disgust. A bad day at work. That's your leadership style, isn't it, Congresswoman? Take credit when things go well. Blame the staff when they don't. When the Green New Deal was popular, you were the face of it. You were on magazine covers. You were giving speeches about saving the planet. When it failed, oh, that was just some staffer having a bad day. AOC was sobbing uncontrollably now. Her entire body shook. She couldn't form words, couldn't mount a defense, couldn't do anything but cry. The Democratic side of the committee was nearly empty. Only a handful of members remained. None of them would meet her eyes. Her staff in the gallery stared at the floor, at their phones. Anything but the destruction happening in front of them. Bongino gathered all his documents, the financial records, the real estate papers, the economic analyses, the interview transcripts, and stacked them neatly. One final question, Congresswoman. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but every microphone in the room picked it up perfectly. One final question. Bongino sat back in his chair. He folded his hands on the table. His voice was quiet now, almost gentle. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. He waited until she looked up, through tears, ruined makeup, broken composure. I've presented evidence today of campaign finance irregularities, of shell companies receiving almost $1 million with no accountability, of payments to your boyfriend from political funds, of a lifestyle that contradicts everything you claim to stand for. I've shown that you killed 25,000 jobs for political theater, that you compared American law enforcement to Nazi concentration camps, that you made basic economic claims that any freshman would know are false. I've demonstrated that your signature policy proposal was, by your own staff's admission, never really about climate change at all. It was about restructuring the entire American economy. He leaned forward slightly. So I'm going to ask you a simple question, Congresswoman. And I want you to take your time. Think about your answer. Because the American people are watching. The room was absolutely silent. Not a cough, not a shuffle, not a whisper. Do you have anything to say? 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. AOC's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Any response? 4 seconds, 5 seconds, 6 seconds. She reached for her water glass. Her hand was shaking so violently she couldn't grip it properly. It slipped. Water splashed across her papers. Any explanation? 7 seconds, 8 seconds, 9 seconds, 10 seconds. She looked around the room desperately. The Democratic side of the dais was nearly empty. The few colleagues who remained were studying their phones, their papers, the ceiling, anything to avoid meeting her eyes. Her staff in the gallery had stopped taking notes. One of them was quietly crying. Any defense? 11 seconds, 12 seconds, 13 seconds, 14 seconds, 15 seconds. A single sob escaped her throat. The microphones picked it up with perfect clarity. It echoed through the silent room. For any of this? 16 seconds, 17 seconds, 18 seconds, 19 seconds, 20 seconds. She covered her face with both hands. Her shoulders heaved. The sound of her crying filled the chamber, raw, broken, desperate. 21 seconds, 22 seconds, 23 seconds, 24 seconds. Camera shutters clicked in rapid succession. Every photographer in the room was capturing this moment. Tomorrow's front pages were being created in real time. 26 seconds, 27 seconds, 28 seconds, 29 seconds, 30 seconds. Nothing. Just the sound of her sobbing and the relentless clicking of cameras. Bongino nodded slowly. When he spoke, his voice carried no triumph, no satisfaction, just a quiet finality. I didn't think so. He closed his folder. Mr. Chairman, I have no further statements at this time. He reached for his water, took a calm sip, and set the glass down with a soft click. But Congresswoman, she looked up through her tears. You might want to get a good lawyer. A very good one. He stood, gathered his documents, and walked out of the hearing room without looking back. Behind him, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez sat alone at the dais, crying into her hands as C-SPAN cameras broadcast her destruction to 20 million viewers. The video hit 50 million views before lunch. I Didn't Think So was trending #1 worldwide within 90 minutes. The 30-second silence clip became the most shared video of the month. Memes multiplied by the thousands. AOC didn't return after the recess. Her office released a terse statement about partisan attacks and politically motivated smears. It was mocked so mercilessly that her staff deleted it within hours. The deletion made things worse. Even her staff knows she's guilty, became the consensus take. The House Ethics Committee announced a formal investigation into campaign finance irregularities. The Department of Justice confirmed it was reviewing referrals regarding the PAC structure. The Federal Election Commission reopened its dormant inquiry into Brand New Congress LLC. A primary challenger, a young progressive named Marcus Webb, who had worked his way up from the Bronx, announced his campaign. He raised $2 million in 48 hours, mostly from small donors in AOC's own district. Internal polling leaked to Politico showed AOC down 19 points among likely Democratic primary voters. The headline, "From Rising Star to Falling Star, AOC's Collapse in Real Time." The squad released a joint statement. "We support due process and believe in the presumption of innocence." It was notable for what it didn't include: no personal calls of support, no joint appearances, no defense of their colleague. Jamal Bowman, asked about his walkout, said only, "I had another commitment." 1 month later, the FBI opened a formal investigation into potential campaign finance violations. Subpoenas were issued for financial records from Brand New Congress LLC, Justice Democrats PAC, and AOC's campaign committee. Saikat Chakrabarti, her former chief of staff, hired a criminal defense attorney. He stopped returning reporters' calls. Riley Roberts, her fiancé, the man who had received $6,000 from the PAC, was served with a federal subpoena. 3 days later, he moved out of their apartment. His spokesperson cited a need for personal space during a difficult time. The engagement was quietly called off. No announcement, no statement. Just the absence of a ring in subsequent photos. Major donors withdrew their support. Act Blue contributions dropped 73%. Speaking engagements were canceled. A book deal was postponed indefinitely. A Netflix documentary project was abandoned. 6 of her 8 staff members resigned within the month. Exit interviews leaked to the press painted a picture of a congresswoman in crisis. Erratic, paranoid, unable to focus on work. 6:23 a.m. One quiet residential street in Washington, D.C. 12 FBI agents. 3 black SUV, a forensic accounting team with specialized equipment for copying hard drives. FBI. Federal warrant. They opened the door. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez answered in a bathrobe. Her face was puffy. Her eyes were red and hollow. She hadn't slept properly in weeks. They took everything. 3 computers, 3 cell phones, filing cabinets full of financial records, campaign documents going back to her first race, 10 years of tax returns. The search lasted 3 hours. Neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, recording on their phones. News helicopters circled overhead. The photograph that defined her downfall was taken at 7:42 a.m., AOC being escorted from her building by 2 FBI agents, not in handcuffs, not yet, but with an agent's hand firmly on her arm. Hair uncombed, no makeup, designer bathrobe hanging open over pajamas. Behind her, visible through the lobby's glass doors, the building's promotional banner advertised its rooftop infinity pool. That photo became the most shared image of the month. From infinity pool to federal investigation, one commentator wrote, the contrast was too perfect, too poetic, too cruel. The grand jury returned a 6-count indictment. United States of America v. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Count 1. Conspiracy to violate federal campaign finance laws. Maximum sentence, 5 years. Count 2. Wire fraud in connection with the transfer of funds through shell companies. Maximum sentence, 20 years, counts 3 and 4. false statements to federal investigators during the initial inquiry. Maximum sentence, 5 years each. Counts 5 and 6. Willful violations of campaign finance disclosure requirements. Maximum sentence, 5 years each. Total maximum sentence, 45 years in federal prison. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was 35 years old. If convicted on all counts with maximum sentences, she would be 80 years old upon release. She tried to run for re-election anyway, from a position of weakness under federal indictment, with her former allies refusing to campaign with her. The primary results weren't close. Marcus Webb, 69%. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, 31%. A 38-point loss in her own district. The largest primary defeat for a sitting incumbent in New York State history. It happened gradually, then all at once. Democratic leadership stripped her of all committee assignments before the trial began. There was no farewell speech on the House floor, no tribute video, no ceremonial resolution thanking her for her service. Nancy Pelosi, asked for comment, said only, "We wish her well in her future endeavors." The ice in those words could have frozen the Potomac. The Biden administration declined to comment. The White House press secretary referred all questions to the Justice Department. The squad scattered like leaves in a hurricane. Ilhan Omar, facing her own legal troubles, issued no statement and attended none of AOC's final votes. Rashida Tlaib, cornered by reporters, said, "I think people are complex, and I wish her the best." When pressed about their friendship, she added, "I wouldn't say we were close. We worked together." Ayanna Pressley blocked AOC on all social media platforms. No explanation, no statement, just digital silence. Jamal Bowman, asked about the woman he had once called "my sister in the struggle," said only, "We had different priorities. I wish her well." The personal abandonment was worse. Riley Roberts, her former fiancé, agreed to cooperate with federal investigators in exchange for immunity from prosecution. He provided testimony about the campaign finance structure, the shell companies, and the decision-making process that led to the payments. He described conversations in which AOC had allegedly directed the transfer of funds. He produced text messages. He explained how the system worked. His testimony was devastating. Former staff members sold their stories to publishers. 3 tell-all books were announced before the trial began. Each promised explosive revelations about the Congresswoman's private behavior. Her mother called once a week. No one else called at all. 1 year later, the verdict. The trial lasted 4 weeks. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records traced the flow of money through shell companies. Email chains showed awareness of the legal requirements and the decision to ignore them. Former staff testified about conversations in which AOC had directed the scheme. Riley Roberts took the stand for 3 days. He didn't look at her once. The defense argued that AOC had trusted her staff and didn't understand the technical requirements. The prosecution pointed out that she had a degree in economics and had given numerous speeches about dark money and campaign finance reform. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on count 1, conspiracy. Guilty on count 2, wire fraud. Guilty on count 3, false statements. Guilty on count 4, false statements. Not guilty on counts 5 and 6. 4 convictions, 2 acquittals. Sentencing came 6 weeks later. The judge noted her lack of prior criminal record and her youth. He also noted the betrayal of public trust, the arrogance displayed during the investigation, the complete absence of remorse. 8 years in federal prison. Federal Correctional Institution, Danbury, Connecticut. The cell measured 8 feet by 10 feet. Metal bed bolted to the wall. Metal toilet in the corner. Small window too high to see out of without standing on the bed. Inmate 78234. The thin mattress, staring at the gray concrete wall. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, former congresswoman, former rising star, former future of the Democratic Party, wore a khaki uniform and slip-on shoes without laces. Her hair, once carefully styled for magazine covers, was pulled back in a simple ponytail. No makeup, no jewelry, no designer, anything. She was 37 years old. She would be 45 when she was eligible for release. The prison tablet in her hands showed a familiar video. She had watched it hundreds of times now, maybe thousands. Dan Bongino's face filled the small screen. His voice came through the tiny speakers. "Do you have anything to say? Any response? Any explanation? Any defense for any of this?" 30 seconds of silence, her own sobbing. "I didn't think so." The video had 142 million views now. It had spawned countless memes, parodies, and remixes. Her breakdown had become a punchline, a reference, a cultural moment. She closed the app, the phone she used to carry, the one that buzzed constantly with notifications, mentions, interview requests, and fan messages, was locked in an evidence room somewhere. She wondered sometimes if it was still buzzing. Probably not anymore. Her mother wrote once a week. The letters said little. Updates about the neighborhood, the weather, her aunt's health. They didn't mention the trial. They didn't mention the verdict. They didn't mention the 8 years. No one else wrote at all. Jamal didn't write. Rashida didn't write. Ayana had blocked her everywhere, even before the conviction. Riley had testified against her, had traded her freedom for his own immunity, had described their private conversations in open court while refusing to meet her eyes. She thought about the hearing sometimes. The moment she had smiled at Bongino and called him just a podcaster. The certainty she had felt. The absolute confidence that she was about to destroy him. I was going to humiliate him. I had the whole thing planned. The tweets were already drafted. The clips were going to go viral. Everyone was going to see him exposed. Instead, she looked around the cell, 8 feet by 10 feet. Gray walls, metal fixtures, a window too high to see the sky. No infinity pool here, no rooftop views of the Capitol, no Steinway piano in the lobby, no private massage rooms, just concrete, and metal, and silence, and time. All because she picked a fight with the wrong man. FBI headquarters, Washington, D.C. Same day. Dan Bongino sat in his office on the 7th floor. The view showed the National Mall, the Washington Monument catching the afternoon light. A knock at the door. "Sir, another interview request about the Ocasio-Cortez case. That's the 14th this week." He didn't look up from his briefing documents. "Decline it." "Yes, sir." The door closed. Bongino returned to his work. Counterterrorism assessments, organized crime updates, national security briefings, the actual work of running half the Federal Bureau of Investigation. He didn't think about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, hadn't in months. She was a closed case, a completed file, a name in the news that no longer required his attention. When reporters managed to corner him at events, on the street outside his home, they always asked the same question. "Deputy Director, any comment on the Ocasio-Cortez conviction?" His answer never varied. "I just told the truth. That's all anyone can do." He went home that evening at 6:30. Dinner with his wife. Normal conversation. Normal life. The man she had called just a podcaster now ran half the FBI. He protected 330 million Americans. He had earned the respect of agents, prosecutors, and colleagues through years of service. The woman who had mocked his qualifications sat in a federal prison cell, watching videos of her own destruction. Danbury Prison. Cell Block C. A woman who once called herself the future of the Democratic Party lies awake at night listening to the sounds of prison doors clanging, guards walking, other inmates crying. She has 7 years left. Then parole hearings, then supervised release, then the rest of her life with a federal conviction attached to her name. No political career, no book deals, no speaking fees, no future, just memory and regret and time. FBI headquarters, 7th floor. A man she dismissed as just a podcaster reviews intelligence briefings about threats to the nation. He makes decisions that affect millions of lives. He goes home to a wife who loves him and a career that validates everything he sacrificed. No regrets, no doubts, no second-guessing, just service and truth and the quiet satisfaction of a job done right. She built her career on Twitter clapbacks and viral moments. He built his career on service and facts. When they finally met in that hearing room, she brought attitude. He brought evidence. There was never really any contest. The truth doesn't need retweets. It doesn't need followers. It doesn't need a blue checkmark or a trending hashtag or a cable news appearance. It just needs someone willing to say it out loud. Dan Bongino had been many things in his life. A cop walking the most dangerous streets in New York, a Secret Service agent willing to take a bullet for presidents he disagreed with, a podcaster speaking uncomfortable truths to millions of listeners. But a coward? Never. And the truth? It never needed her permission.